Cool. Okay, you guys can all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yes, so welcome. Good afternoon or good morning or wherever you might be. I'm happy to present this recent work on Ebb-and-Flow protocols, which is joint work with my colleagues Nusret and our advisor David. And this appeared in the symposium on security and privacy earlier in the year. So this work began with this paper about a year ago, was uploaded on Archive, and it talks about a protocol called Gaspar. And Gaspar is kind of a mathematically simplified version, if you will, of the Ethereum 2 beacon chain protocol. So we thought that's interesting. We want to look at that. And how does it work? Just, you know, to give like a half a sentence description of what Gaspar is. It's a mix of Gaspar FFG, so that's Gaspar, the friendly finality gadget, with an underlying protocol which uses the LMD ghost fork choice rule. And this protocol claims to be secure in even the partially synchronous network model. And so we were interested in how this protocol works and when we looked at this. And the key takeaways from this talk will be the following three, I hope. The first thing is that we found a liveness attack on Gaspar. So Gaspar is not secure even in the synchronous network model, let alone the partially synchronous network model. We then tried to dig a little deeper and to understand what problem is Gaspar trying to solve. Is this like just a classical consensus, the way we know it, or is there anything special? And so we formalized this under the name Ebb-and-Flow protocols, and I'll explain what that means. And then since Gaspar is not a secure implementation of an Ebb-and-Flow protocol, we were left with the question, do such protocols exist at all, and how can we design them? And so we came up with a family of protocols called snap and chat protocols, and these are actually provably secure. And they're optimal in terms of resiliences. And so that's going to be the third part of the talk. Okay, to get started, I assume most of the audience is pretty familiar with kind of the basics of consensus, but just to establish some like common language. Consensus protocols, basically, the ones we have right now, fall into kind of two families. On the one hand, we have partially synchronous BFT protocols with protocols such as PBFT or hot stuff. And on the other hand, we have Nakamoto-style longest chain-based protocols, which you find in Bitcoin, in Ethereum 1, or in Ouroboros. And it's interesting, these two protocols behave very differently. There's somehow this dichotomy, and that's somehow interesting. In what sense do they behave differently? So a traditional BFT protocol, such as hot stuff, works as follows. Someone proposes a block, then everybody votes whether they like this block or not. All these votes get collected, and if a certain quorum is met, then this block has a special status. It's now notarized or confirmed, whatever you want to call it. And then we can build on top of this block, and this way we reach consensus. Now, what would happen if one day there's less participants online than the day before? Well, someone puts out a block, right? Everybody votes, but now we don't have enough signatures. And so this quorum is not met, and the block doesn't get the special status, and no transactions are being confirmed, and the protocol stalls. And the reason why this is, in a nutshell, you can think of these protocols as having the following philosophy. Peers that I don't hear from, they are plotting against me. Something's wrong, I should not take a decision. Why is that? Because, well, maybe the reason I didn't hear from all these other guys is because they're behind a network partition, right? And they're running their own version of the protocol. They don't see me, I don't see them. Someone there also proposes a block, right? They also take a vote, and now it's paramount that they not reach a decision either, because if both of us reach a decision, then this could be conflicting and we would get a safety violation. So traditional BFT protocols don't give us this safety violation. And that's why they're safe under network partition. And that's a property we call finality. On the other hand, we have longest chain protocol, which works as follows, right? Everybody puts out a block. And then if one day there are fewer people, no problem, we just keep putting out blocks, right? And then we confirm once a block is buried K deep. That's great because these protocols, they always keep going, even if there are fewer people online, right? So they're available under dynamic participation. Well, the drawback, or yeah, the philosophy here is a little more optimistic than that of partially synchronous BFT protocols. It's pretty much peers I don't hear from, they're just asleep, nothing wrong with them. The problem or the drawback with this is, well, if the reason I don't hear from them is a network partition, then these folks over on the other part, they're also putting out blocks, right? They're also confirming them, and so I see a safety violation. So, if we have a network in which there is dynamic participation, so every now and then there's high participation, sometimes there's low participation, and there might be even network partitions, then a longest chain type protocol gives us a ledger which pretty much grows, no matter what, right? And that's great. That's dynamic availability. We want this property of our protocols. But the problem is that under network partition, they're not safe. On the other hand, a more traditional partially synchronous BFT protocol gives us a ledger that is always safe. So this ledger is final. But the problem here is, well, if the reason not many people show up is because participation is low, then this protocol is not live, even though one could perhaps think that it could, right, or it should. So okay, we have these two desired properties, right? It's a natural question to ask: can we have both of them? And the answer to this is no. And perhaps if we already look at the problem in this form, it's not so surprising, right? How could you have one ledger that satisfies both of these plots, right? The plots look different, but you can also formalize this and convince yourself that this is actually impossible to get. And we call this the availability-finality dilemma. Okay, so given that there is the availability-finality dilemma, which is you cannot have a single ledger that is always safe and live under network partition and under dynamic participation, what's the next best thing we can hope for? And we're proposing the following, and we would argue that that is what Gaspar is trying to do. Let's decompose this ledger into two ledgers. On the one hand, an available full ledger and a finalized prefix ledger. And we want the available full ledger to be always live, no matter what. And it should be safe unless there is a network partition. So it should behave like one of these Nakamoto style protocols. And we want the finalized prefix ledger to be always safe. And it should be live unless there is low participation. So this ledger should behave like one of the traditional partially synchronous BFT protocols. And kind of this description, or this is the consensus problem we argue that Ethereum 2 is trying to solve, or Gaspar is trying to solve, and we call this the ebb-and-flow property. Why do we call this the ebb-and-flow property? If you look now at a plot of these two ledgers, right, how they behave, you can you see that the available ledger is basically speeding ahead no matter what, and the finalized prefix will catch up with the available ledger whenever the situation allows. So whenever participation is high and whenever there is no network partition. So these are now two nested ledgers. Nesting of ledgers, you might ask, is that a shady thing? We don't think so. People have done this before us, in fact. There's a work called Flexible BFT from 2019, which makes good use of this idea, or does something similar, let's say. And then even Nakamoto, right? If you run different clients with different keys in your K deep rule, then you get nested ledgers. So even in longest chain, this is a pretty natural thing to do. But the question, of course, arises, are there any such protocols with this ebb and flow property? So I promised you we have an attack on Gaspar, so let's take a moment to take a look at this, right? What's wrong with Gaspar? Why does it not satisfy this? So Gaspar works as follows. Time proceeds in epochs. Epochs are further subdivided into slots. And for every slot, there is a pseudo-randomly selected committee. And these committees, one person in the committee proposes blocks, and these blocks are chained. And the long chain constitutes kind of this available ledger. And then there is an additional step in which a prefix of that chain is chosen as the finalized prefix. And so we kind of get this ebb and flow property. So the hope. In our attack is a balancing type attack, which works as follows. So the overall goal of the adversary is to build out two parallel chains that are always in tie. So there's the consensus protocol never reaches a decision which of the two chains to choose. And that works as follows. So in every slot, right, we have our committee, and our committee really consists of a bunch of adversarial guys here in red and a bunch of honest guys here in green. And in the first slot of the attack, the proposer who's putting out the blocks is adversarial, let's say, or we can just wait for a slot where that is the case. And this proposer puts out two conflicting blocks. So this proposer starts this attack with two blocks. And it shows one of these blocks only to half of the honest validators in the slot. And it shows the other block only to the other half of validators in the slot. And then, one half votes for the left block, one half votes for the right block. So what now, right? Both of the chains, the blue and the orange chain, have the same number of votes. Well, we go to the next slot. In the next slot, you note that the adversarial committee members from the previous slot haven't done anything right yet. So we're going to pick one of them, and we're going to have that the left chain, and show this only to one half of the honest validators in the current slot. And we're going to have another validator vote for the right chain and show that vote to the other half of the honest guys. Now, again, one half sees the left chain leading and will vote for left, and the other half sees right chain leading and will vote for right. And we again get a tie. And we can continue this process in the next slot. And in fact, we can continue this process throughout an epoch. And there's a kind of with a little twist, you can also make it work for subsequent epochs. And so you build out these two chains, and there's never really a decision on whether the left or the right chain is the one to adopt by all the nodes. So the main takeaway here is, if you have adversarial network delay, right, we're using this in releasing these votes or releasing these blocks only to some of the honest validators. If you have adversarial network delay, which you do have in synchronous network model, then 6 adversarial validators per slot are enough to stall this protocol. And if your committee is large, then that basically means any fraction will do. So we were happy with this attack. We posted it on ETH Research, and we had some conversations with Ethereum folks. And one of the reactions, and that's a very natural reaction, is, well, this attack really does depend on networking assumptions that are somewhat contrived in practice, right? These are large scale, internet scale systems, lots and lots of validators, very different internet access. How would the adversary be able to control the timing in such a fine-grained way? And really this perhaps points to some larger question, right? Is the synchronous network model a good model for internet scale consensus? So we wanted to fix this, and the way we work with this criticism or with this feedback is, okay, can we make this work for random network delay? And we do that in 2 steps. So suppose whenever there's a tie, nodes were flipping a coin to decide whether they should vote left or right. What happens then is that roughly 1/2 up to square root of n will vote for right, and roughly 1/2 of the honest validators will vote for left, right? Again, up to square root of n. And so if the adversary has square root of n validators itself, it can later on, after honest guys have cast their vote, go take a look at the outcome and use its own votes to rebalance. And so it can keep basically the same attack running under the assumption that there is a random coin flip to break this tie. Now that there is no random coin flip, but there is a way to emulate basically this random coin flip. And the way to do this is we had these sway votes, right? Earlier we used sway votes to get the folks from the next slot to vote for what we want them to vote for. Now what happens in reality is the tie is broken consistently and deterministically by the hash of the blocks. And we can now release a sway vote from the previous slot in such a way that it hopefully reaches roughly half of the validators before the voting deadline and half after. I have an illustration for this. Yes, so there is a point in time, here you see a time axis, there is a point in time where the honest validators are supposed to vote, and the adversary releases a sway vote for, let's suppose the ties are broken in favor of the left chain. So the adversary will release a sway vote in favor of the right chain, some t delay time before the voting deadline. And then what will happen is that some nodes, for example, node A, receive that sway vote before the voting deadline. So by the voting deadline, they will take the sway vote into account and they will vote for the right chain because that one has a vote more. Whereas some others receive the sway vote after the deadline. So at the deadline, they will vote left because that's what we said the tie breaking would do. And now who votes for what really depends on the propagation times of these messages in the network, right? With t delay being a parameter that the adversary can tune. And so it actually turns out, so we ran some experiments with this. We basically had a replica of the Ethereum 2 peer-to-peer network, and we measured the message propagation there. And what we get is kind of this, this CDF plot here. So on the x-axis, you have time after the broadcasting of a message, and on the y-axis, you have how many nodes have been reached. And what you can see is that after about 100 milliseconds, a message has been received by roughly 50% of the nodes. But more importantly, it's pretty consistent. So it happens rarely that it exceeds 60%, and it happens rarely that it it only reached less than 40%. And so if the adversary kind of can compensate for this, then we're back in business again. And in fact, the question, this is how the adversary has to tune this parameter t delay, right? And here on this plot, you see for the adversary in different positions in this network that we measured, and different choices of t delay, you can see how long the attack was on average successful. And the punchline is that there's roughly a band of maybe 10 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds within which the adversary has to hit the t delay, and then it can again destroy the security of the protocol. So now, so then the conversation with Ethereum didn't end with this earlier quote, but there is now in fact a proposal to fix this attack and to. Can you guys hear me again? Sorry, my audio.
Yes, so now it's fine again. I think it was just a, very brief interruption. Now, yeah.
Someone is spam calling me. Okay, sorry about this.
Yes, you're back.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about this. All right. Yes, so there is a proposal, and this is being worked on to see if that proposal now actually fixes the problem. There is still no security proof so far. Cool. Okay, so then I come to the third part, of the talk, which is about our solution or our construction for an Ebb-and-Flow protocol that we devise in this paper, which are snap and chat protocols. So snap and chat protocols have the following properties. Namely, they output two ledgers, right? A finalized prefix and a full available ledger. The finalized prefix ledger is secure under network partitions if less than 33% of all participants are adversarial. The available full ledger is secure under dynamic participation if less than 50% of awake participants are adversarial. And these two ledgers are consistent in the sense that the finalized prefix is a prefix of the available full ledger. And this construction is optimal in the sense that each of these two ledgers satisfies the best possible security that we can expect in the respective environment or under the respective conditions. So here's how snap and chat protocols work. Transactions enter the protocol. They're first ordered by a longest chain protocol into a ledger. And this ledger is, you can think of as a chain of blocks, right? This is a blockchain. Then we take snapshots of this ledger and we input these snapshots into a partially synchronous BFT protocol. And what this protocol outputs is a chain of chains of blocks. So you can think of this as a chain, and in each block, a chain of blocks, and in each block, there is again a chain of blocks, right? Because there is a snapshot in there. So then what we do is we flatten this chain. So we take the blocks out, we order them as they are, we sequence them as they are ordered here. We concatenate them and we remove duplicate transactions. And we output this as the finalized prefix. And then we take this ledger, we append the current output of the longest chain to this ledger. We again flatten and sanitize this, and then we get the available full ledger. Let's take a quick look at some examples how this protocol behaves when it's being run and how it resolves the problems we mentioned earlier. So, under normal operation, here's what happens, right? The transaction enters into the longest chain output ledger. It will then be picked up by a snapshot in the partially synchronous BFT protocol. And then this transaction TX1 will move, so to speak, from the available full ledger into the finalized prefix ledger. And then by then, maybe another transaction 2 has arrived, which is now only in the available ledger. And eventually, more transactions arrive. And again, more snapshots are being created. And every time there's a snapshot, these transactions enter the finalized prefix. If there is a network partition, right, then the longest chain protocol might not be secure, but the partially synchronous BFT protocol will be, because that's what it's good for. So, there might be some forks on the longest chain, and maybe we first snapshot transaction 1, and then later on we snapshot transaction 3, and that's no problem, right? We basically, due to this prepending operation, that gets reconciled, and eventually the protocol continues to work. If there are many adversaries, so more than 1/3 adversary, right, then the partially synchronous BFT protocol might not be secure, but the longest chain will be, at least as long as there are no network partitions. And in this case, only one longest chain, right? There are no persistent forks. And so even though the partially synchronous BFT protocol might not be safe and is taking snapshots, all these snapshots are going to be consistent. And so overall, the protocol still works as expected. So I come to an end in concluding about some advantages and disadvantages of snap and chat protocols. What's nice about them is they're a black box construction, pretty much from off-the-shelf subprotocols. As a result of this, you get a relatively simple and modular security analysis. They're future-proof in the sense that, you know, if tomorrow you have a new favorite BFT protocol, you just swap out your current BFT protocol and the construction will still work. And it's easy to inherit features from the constituent protocols for the output ledgers of the snap and chat protocol. For example, if the BFT protocol is accountable, then the finalized ledger, the finalized prefix will also be accountable. Drawbacks. One big drawback of this is these protocols lose, you know, a property we might call predictable transaction validity. That means that at the time of producing a longest chain block, we don't know what its prefix will be when it enters the ledger. And this produces problems because common light client and sharding techniques rely on this. But there's another work, a subsequent paper, which addresses this and gives us a ebb-and-flow protocol, which does have predictable transaction validity. And yeah, that concludes my talk. Here are the links to the papers, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.